In this video, we will talk about circles. So the main standard form equation of a circle is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. The center is at the point hk. The radius is that r. Actually, if the center is 0, 0, then we're just going to use the equation x squared plus y squared equals r squared. For our first example, we are going to write the equation of the circle with radius 8/5 and center -3 4/3. So this one is pretty straightforward. You're just going to use your general circle equation, x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. Our h is -3, our k is 4/3. The r is 8/5, and be careful, make sure that you change that sign to plus. You don't really need to do anything with these fractions. In fact, I recommend that you don't do anything with them, except that I would like you to simplify out that r right there. All you need to do is square it. Just remember that you need to square both the numerator and the denominator, so your final answer is going to be this right here. For our next example, we're actually given an equation of a circle, and we're going to find the intercepts of this circle. So these often are not very nice numbers, that's fine. So let's go ahead, we're going to find our intercepts. To find your y-intercept, remember, you are going to set x equal to 0. So if we plug in 0 to that equation, we end up getting this right here. You will get 4 plus x minus 1 squared equals 25. And the next thing you're going to do to solve this is move over the 4. So we end up getting x minus 1 squared is equal to 21. We are going to take the square root of both sides. I want you to remember a really important rule when you take the square root of both sides. Make sure that you include a plus or minus. Then we'll get x minus 1 equals plus or minus 21. We are not quite done with this one. We end up getting x equals 1 plus or minus, square root of 21. I forgot that radical the first time. The square root of 21. If you want to write it as a point, you can. It would be 1 plus the square root of 21, comma 0, 1 minus the square root of 21, comma 0. You don't have to do that. It really does take up a lot of space to do that. So x-intercept is pretty similar. Oh, I just noticed that, I'm hoping you guys caught this one before me, that this x right here should actually be a y. So my x-intercept I find by setting y equal to 0. And when I do that, I get x plus 2 squared plus 0 minus 1 squared equals 25. That gives me x plus 2 squared plus 1, because negative 1 squared is 1, is equal to 25. I get x plus 2 squared equals 24. I now need to take the square root of both sides. I'm actually running out of room, so I'm going to go up here. So I end up getting plus or minus the square root of 24. So I get x plus 2 equals plus or minus the square root of 24. Now, you're perfectly allowed to leave this as an unsimplified radical. In pre-calculus and calculus, and as you get into more advanced classes, it really doesn't matter so much. The only time you're going to need to be able to do that, I know you guys are really good at it because you've done it a lot, is when you're working with sines and cosines. So it does end up giving you 2 radical 6, or we get x equals -2 plus or minus 2 radical 6. So this next type of problem is a little bit challenging. We have to find the center and the radius of the following circle. We have 2x squared plus 2y squared minus 16x plus 4y plus 20 equals 0. So in order to do this type of problem, we have to get the equation in standard form. That was the one that we had at the very beginning, the x minus k squared plus y minus, x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. So we are going to be using completing this square. You probably have done it before, but it may not be something that you really remember that well. So the first thing we're going to do is move over our constant term. Any term that doesn't have an x or a y in it needs to move over to the opposite side. So I now get 2x squared plus 2y squared minus 16x plus 4y is equal to negative 20. Next thing I'm going to do is get rid of the coefficients in front of my x squared and my y squared. Now, you might have done stuff before with completing the square where you had to factor that out. With circles, however, you always will have the same number in front of the x squared as the y squared. It's just the nature of the way that circles are. If it did not have the same coefficient, that actually would be a different type of conic section. I don't know if you remember those, but it would be an ellipse or something else. So in this case, we can get rid of the 2's in front of the x squared and the y squared by dividing everything by 2. So I'm going to just do that right now. And that gives me x squared plus y squared minus 8x plus 2y is equal to negative 10. Next thing I need to do, and you could have probably done this in the first step, also is group together your x terms and your y terms. So I have x squared minus 8x, and I have y squared plus 2y. These are going to go together. You can put them in parentheses. Now, I don't know if you remember this part, but we are going to be filling in a blank right here. That's where we're going to actually complete the square. And I'm going to leave a blank on the right-hand side just so I can remember that I need to put whatever I do to the left side needs to be done to the right side of the equation. So our final goal is going to be to get this in a setup that looks like that. The number that is going to go with the x is going to be half of that negative 8. Which is negative 4. To figure out what's in the parentheses, you take the half of that negative 8, negative 4, and you're going to square it. So that is going to be 16. Shorthand way to remember it is that this is going to be, maybe it's not short, but it's the quick way to remember it is going to be negative 8 over 2 and then squared. With our y term, we are going to do half of, in the parentheses, it's going to be half of 2, which is 1. And then same thing, it's going to be squared. So I'm going to do 2 divided by 2. That's going to be squared. And I add a 1 in that space right there. So now I added 16 and 1 to the left-hand side. I have to add 16 and 1 to the right-hand side. I am going to be left with negative 10 plus 17, which gives me positive 7. By the way, you should always get a positive answer. Otherwise, your radius will be an imaginary number, which isn't going to happen in these things. So now the last thing I need to do is just identify, based on what I know about circles, what my h is and what my k is. I know that my h, which is the term with the x, is 4. My k is negative 1. Be careful with the sign there. My radius is the square root of this last number here, so it's going to be radical 7. So radius is radical 7. The center of my circle is 4, -1. So our last type of circle example, they give us the center of the circle and they tell us a point that the circle also contains. So right now I know that my equation is of the form x plus 1, that 1 comes from the x coordinate of the center, plus y minus 4 squared is equal to r squared. I don't know my r value, but I can find it. And there are two ways that I can find it. I'm going to give you both methods. You can decide which one you like better. So here's method 1. So method 1, you are going to find the radius, and I'll draw a picture for you so you can kind of see what's going on. So I have the center of the circle, and I have this point right here. Circle goes kind of like that. I want to know what my radius is. So one way to find the radius is by using the distance formula. So I can just find the distance between the center and that one point. So I would just set it up like this. I end up getting -3 squared plus 6 squared. And I take the square root of that. That gives me 9 plus 36, or the square root of 45. Now, this is one of the places where you probably do not want to simplify this radical because you'll just get something more complicated. So I would leave it as is. So my radius is radical 45. My final answer for this is going to be just x plus 1 squared plus y minus 4 squared is equal to radical 45 squared, which is going to be just 45. So for method 2, you're going to notice something in just a minute, but I'll show it to you first. You're going to take that equation that you have right here, and you can actually substitute in the other point, 2, -2, to that equation, and then find your r from there. So you may or may not notice this, but this method is actually going to give you the exact same type of thing. I just have the signs reversed. So I actually am going to get r squared equals 45 here, or r equals the square root of 45. This is the same method that you were doing when you did the distance formula. That's actually where the equation of a circle comes from. If that doesn't really make sense for you, that's fine. You're not actually going to have to really know it. But I think when you have an equation, it's always a good idea to know where it comes from. So you can use either of these two methods. I think most of you have mastered the distance formula, so for many of you, that probably is going to be what you prefer. But to me, it doesn't really matter which way you do that one.